right, so here we are, Greg, our first official episode, right? So we did the pilot episode, and we're so happy to be welcoming back Mr. Bruce Licher. So thank you, Bruce, for coming back. We didn't scare you off the first time.
No, not at all. Glad to be here.
So we did want to talk about the first release that came out on Independent Project Records, IP001. I am holding this up right.
Yes, you
Project 197. And we had some questions specifically about the record and putting it together. But I think prior to that, we wanted to talk a little bit about the influences that led up and what was happening prior to that. Is that right, Greg?
Yeah, kind of to get a sense of the whole zeitgeist or whatever you want to call it, because I know you're in the art department at UCLA, and I know that was a time that that department was going through a lot of change. You had you had people like Chris Burden coming in. Was Paul McCarthy on the faculty yet there?
Not at that point, not that I'm aware of, anyway. But yeah, Chris Burden was definitely the big influence for me in terms of creating this record and starting the record label. I mean, I didn't even realize I was starting a record label. It was just like, oh, I'm going to do a project.
Yeah.
So, but yeah,
it seemed like there was a lot of that was a time when like the department was going through. They were kind of ditching a lot of the more representational, older types of fine art or whatever, and going into sort of what they were calling. I mean, later on, they were calling it new forms. So you had a lot of performance art, video art, et cetera, et cetera. I wanted to get a sense of how that influenced me.
Yeah, it was definitely an exciting time. I mean, I was, had been just doing all of the normal art stuff and learning all the different things that they taught there. And then word got around that they were bringing in Chris Burden, and of course his reputation preceded him. And it was exciting to kind of think, oh, what's this going to be all about? Because he was teaching a class called New Forms and Concepts. And so it was like, wow, I have to try this out. So I was in his first class there, along with Brent Wilcox and Tim Quinn, who had started a band called Neath. And that was my first meeting up with them. And it was going to class one day and seeing Tim Quinn wearing an Ultravox t-shirt. I thought, okay, here's somebody I can get along with.
Kindred spirit.
So, and just, they were friends with John Talley Jones and the Urinals. And so I was invited to come see Neath and the Urinals perform at Kirchhoff Coffee House at UCLA. They did an evening gig, and that sort of turned my mind around a little bit. I was like, wow, this is interesting. I could get involved in this. So,
have you been doing music previously? I mean,
well, I've been
playing in bands or
no, that I had not. I had not ever played music with anybody else up to that point. I had started going to see bands at the clubs in Hollywood, the Whiskey and the Starwood and some of the other places where the punk bands were playing. And I started off going for a photography class to take photographs. And somewhere in a box, I still have a whole bunch of photos that I took from back then that I should probably dig out. But it just, at some point, it was actually the No New York album that Brian Eno produced of the no wave bands in New York, where something clicked in my brain that I can do this. It was like the band's DNA and Mars were doing something so unique. And with DNA, it was just like these simple, repetitive things that just kind of fit together in a really interesting way. And it just clicked in my brain. I could do that. And so that was when I went out and bought a guitar and started, just creating strange noises on it. So after seeing Neath play, I went up to Brent and Tim, and I just said, hey, if you guys ever, want somebody else to come jam with you guys, I'm up for it. So, and they invited me. So that was that's how my musical experience started.
At that point, had you been also listening to like Glenn Branca, or did that come a little later?
That would have been a little later. I think it was 1981 when I first became aware of Glenn Branca. So this was 79 when I first met up with the Neef guys and started working with them. And so we just started, and I mean, I you know, we can certainly get into Neef later at some point, but we just, you know, we just got together once a week and recorded what we were doing, and then we'd pick out all the good stuff, and we decided to make a record because the Urinals had done it, and you know, we were seeing their single in the bins up at Tower Sunset, and I was like, wow, that would be cool to have your record in Tower Sunset. You know?
Yeah. So
we just all put $40 in, and we got as many records back as we could, and so Neef had a record, and it was something that, you know, Brent Wilcox pretty much was sort of putting together, and then once we'd done that, I thought, well, that was fun. I want to do another record, and so that was when I realized that UCLA had what they called an independent project course that if you were in your final year, you could sign up for this. You find an instructor to be your, you know, the instructor that you work with, and you create your own project to do. And so I decided I wanted to make a record as a fine art piece, and just decided to create some music, and Brent Wilcox helped me to record it. We did it in the office of the audiovisual services at UCLA, which is where he worked. And I invited Mark Erskine to come in and play bass and percussion, metal percussion, and asked Kevin Barrett from the Urinals to play drums. So we just spent an afternoon kind of jamming in the audiovisual services department, and Brent recorded it, and voila, I had an EP.
That's great.
Was it all recorded in one session basically then?
Yeah.
Wow.
Not sure there were any overdubs. No, there wasn't. There was a couple of guitar overdubs.
Okay.
Because I remember there were a couple where I did do an overdub. But yeah, it was basically my first recording studio experience. I mean, Brent had been recording the jam sessions that Neef did, which is what ended up on the EP that Neef put out. But
so Bruce, were there rehearsals, or did you just hit record and go, or did
just hit record and go? I mean, I had a couple of riffs and ideas in mind, but it was pretty much all just created on the spot.
Wow.
So
then putting the record together for the project 197, I imagine during this course, this Art 197 independent project, you came up with all of the artwork as well as finding out how to press records and all that. That was all part of the project.
That was part of the project. I had been also making experimental films at the time. And so the imagery on the front cover are some still frames from one of the films that I made. And then I had also been learning silkscreen printing in one of my classes. And so I did silkscreen printing on the records. I had them pressed with no paper labels on them. It's just the black plastic straight across. So I kind of came up with the idea of having a picture that would be silk screened across the white inner sleeve to the black center label to the white inner sleeve on the other side. So it kind of goes from positive to negative to positive again.
Wow. So I have the second pressing. I don't have the first pressing. So
yeah. I simplified it. The first pressing was 3 colors. And again, it's kind of like one of those things where, you know, I think I pressed 300 copies the first time for the first pressing. And amazingly, I sold them all. And then there were people wanting more. And so I did the second pressing. And there were, I think, 364 copies is what I got back the second time. And, you know, I didn't really feel like doing 3-color silkscreen on both sides of the record for the second one. So I just did a single color. ultimately, it always seems like, when I try to save time or money, it ends up being not as nice as I would have liked.
Oh,
Kind of learn your lesson.
who bought these? Did you have them in the record store? Did you go have a distributor? Or is
Well,
it
I
students?
took them to Tower Sunset, and they took
Nice.
some on consignment. So it was a
Wow.
real kick to see them there. But no, I had also started learning about some of the independent distributors. Brent Wilcox, when he sold the Neef EPs, he had found a couple of distributors that had taken copies. I think 40 copies of the Neef EP ended up going over to the Netherlands to a distributor in Europe. And so you just start, you buy fanzines and you see ads in there for various distributors, or just talking to like the guys in the urinals, they'd say, oh yeah, you should try this distributor out. So yes, I did start selling to a few distributors and stores, and then I sent out a bunch of copies to music magazines. Like OP magazine was reviewing a lot of stuff, which was the precursor to Option, although people might not like it described that way, but it was
I remember, when it sort of transformed.
Yeah, but I mean, there were other fanzines and music magazines that you just send a copy to, and I started getting reviews. Actually, I got a review in Slash magazine for that, and I was really that was a high point for me, was getting Claude Bessy of Slash magazine to write a review, and he actually kind of liked it. So that was kind of cool.
Great.
I think the final sentence of his review says, "Some people really know how to overcome art's bad reputation."
Wow. Yeah.
So
That's not bad at all.
and that I'm sure that helps. People see those reviews and they go out looking for it.
Yeah, that's me. So I did have a question in reading through the credits on Project 197, Bruce. It says in the credits says appreciation, and you mention your professor Chris Burden, but you also mentioned somebody named Shay Vaz.
Yeah.
So
that's otherwise known as Dan Vosnick, who was the singer in After Image. He was a good friend of mine, still is a good friend of mine, but he's somebody that I met at UCLA, another musician, and I can remember him bringing his guitar to school and playing it in the stairwells of the art building, and so yeah, I mean, he and I hung out. We ended up collaborating on some music after Project 197 as well. So.
So we wanted to talk a little bit about the songs, Bruce, if you don't mind, or the pieces.
Yes.
That's what I should say, Greg, right? The pieces. So
It sounds more official.
Anyway.
The lead-off piece 9, which was also included on the O Tour labels.
Yes.
Compilation. And if anybody's watching this and you don't have this, you should have this. So this compilation. And so 9 was included on that compilation. A 2-minute piece. Where did the title come from for this? I'm going to ask you about all the titles since they're primarily instrumental pieces.
Yeah. 9. So that one starts, as I recall, with like a repeating tone. It goes dee, 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 dee. I had a little tiny pocket calculator to, and it had little tones on it, just like Kraftwerk did their song Pocket Calculator. Well, I just pushed and held the number 9 down, and that created that sound. The dee, 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 dee. And so I just called it 9.
Yeah, I love
that.
I love that. Yeah.
Great.
There's a meaning.
And there's a couple of other sound. I mean, that little dee 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 sound on there is from that pocket calculator as well.
Nice. It's a great piece. I love it too. I actually like this the whole record quite a bit. And then, so are we okay to ask "I Smell a Rat" where that title came from? Do you recall?
No, not really.
All right. That's fair enough.
Yeah, that one I believe has Mark Erskine playing the bass on that. And then I do the suitably no wave guitar stuff on it, and
which sounds great, by the way.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a fun piece. Yeah, it was just sort of a little jam, and
that's like a normally tuned guitar where you started experimenting with other types of tunings and stringing of the guitar and anything.
That was normal tuned guitar. Yeah, at that point, that was all I was playing. The only thing I was doing as far as strange tunings on my guitar sometimes would be I'd just detune all the strings and then kind of make some noise with it.
Get it all atonal and stuff.
Yeah. Just make it so they're kind of like really jangling around, and then turn everything up to 10. The reverb and the
find those nodal points of maximum dissonance.
Exactly. So that was something I did on the Bridge EP, the next record, but still. Yeah, it wasn't until I saw Glenn Branca perform in early 1981 at CalArts in Valencia that it suddenly just clicked in my brain, hey, you don't have to tune your guitar the way that most people tune their guitar. And you can actually create some more interesting sounds and if you do something different.
And then the last one, I really like this piece. It's only 30 seconds. No, I'm curious how, so it's kind of like a wind noise or an atmospheric noise. I was really curious if you have any memory about how that noise was created. Is it synthesizer or mics in a open room, or do you remember?
Well, one of the things that I'd been doing in these experimental films that I was making is that I was experimenting with tape loop feedback, where I would check out 2 small reel-to-reel tape recorders, and you would set them up side by side, and you would set the first one to record, and then you would stretch the tape between the 2, and the second one would then play back what you just recorded.
Wow.
So you would it might take 5 minutes or more to build up something, but
it's like a very long tape delay.
Yeah, I would just record like ambient sounds, or like I hit these tape recorders that you could check out. It was through the film department at UCLA, and they had batteries in them. So you could, I remember going up into the Santa Monica Mountains to some of these I don't know, they were like old radar installations or something like that. Had these big concrete platforms up in the mountains, and I would just go up there and experiment, and so I was kind of creating these tape delays, and I'm thinking that piece that you're talking about was from some of those tapes, but
Okay.
honestly, I don't remember at this point.
Okay. Yeah,
But
I like that
yeah.
piece quite a bit. And there's some great photos in Savage Impressions book about you with you in these tape loop machines.
I think there is a photo in there about that shows me on in the mountains there with the tape delay.
Very cool. So one more title, because it's very specific, Bruce. 21K08. That seems very specific of a title. So maybe the other ones might be more random, but what, any memory of that?
Yeah, at this point, I had gotten access to the subterranean utility tunnels at UCLA so that I could create one of my experimental films down there. And I just remember there was one part, I don't know, you'd be going along these tunnels and they would have these numbers and letters to kind of tell you where you were or something. It reflected, and I just remember seeing 21K08, and I just thought, oh, that's a cool title. So it was just something I saw on a wall in the tunnels, as far as I remember.
Yeah.
So, and that one, yeah, that's the percussive piece, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the metal percussion, and yeah, that was Mark and I. It was mostly Mark Erskine that recorded that. And we just played around with that. And I like that piece a lot.
Yeah, I do too. It's almost a precursor to what came for Savage Republic, I would say, some of these pieces.
Yeah, the first music that Mark and I did together was we were in a sculpture class together before I even joined Neath. And they had this big sculpture yard with a bunch of scrap metal in it. And we just decided, after being in Chris Burden's class, that we were going to do a scrap metal percussion performance as one of our class projects. And so we just, came up with this 5-minute scrap metal percussion thing. And towards the end of it, all of a sudden we realized that everybody in the class had joined in.
Oh.
The whole class, including the teacher, were all like banging on scrap metal.
So it's a industrial version of a drum circle, sounds like.
Exactly.
Well,
an arty industrial version.
So we didn't mention that at least the first edition came out in 1980, right? Is that about the time frame? And then the second edition came out in 1981. So
yeah,
that sounds about right. So no idea that this was going to end up being an actual legitimate record label at this time.
No, but it's interesting because when I decided to do it, I just thought, okay, I need to come up with a record label name, because every record needs a label name. You got to have a label. So, and I tried coming up with names, and I couldn't tell you what I was thinking of, but everything just felt like it was like, oh, I don't know, that's just kind of not right, or it felt like it was just too weird. It didn't fit. And I just thought, well, what is this? It's an independent project record. Okay, there's the label name.
Wow.
And then I thought, okay, you got to have a catalog number. So, okay, it's IP001. No idea I was going to ever do another one, but this was IP001. And then, of course, once it was done and I started getting it out there, and friends coming up saying, wow, that's really cool, you made a record, and I just thought, okay, I want to make another one. And that's how it went.
So that's our next episode.
Yes, exactly.
Very cool. Oh, I'm ecstatic to learn all this because I just love this. And
Cool.
the name Independent Project Record for me is so iconic that I love hearing the origin of how this happened and this course at UCLA. And we might as well mention, Greg and Bruce, that now that we're putting out this episode IP001, that there's 2 releases on Independent Project Records that have come out. We talked about the Source compilation, but Half String and the new version of the Scenic CD are being released this week. At least streaming digital, right,
Yes.
Bruce?
Yes, and the half string CDs are going to be available and getting into stores. The Scenic, unfortunately, we had an issue with the die cutter for the package, and we're going to have to reprint those covers. So that will be delayed until the end of the month, or the end of October.
Okay.
But it's coming.
Okay,
The
so
works in the process.
It's a process, yeah.
Yeah.
I would rather wait than anything be rushed or not looking like I expect from anything that comes from Independent Project Records.
Well, that's how I felt. I mean, it's like, to be honest, the covers that we got, we are sending our promotional mailing out with the existing covers. They're a bit tilted, not how they're supposed to be.
They'll be collector's items.
Collector's items, exactly. But I figure, if people are spending good money on this, then we need to give it to them the way that it should be. So.
And I know you have very high quality standards, Bruce. I can tell from everything that you put out, which looks
do my best.
Well, we wanted to thank you so much for coming on to talk about this record in
Happy to do so.
Project 197. And for anybody who hasn't heard it, definitely seek it out. I know that there's some YouTube clips that somebody threw up. There's a couple where you could hear it, but I don't know how easy it will be for anybody to locate any copies. Like Bruce said, there was 300 copies of the first pressing, 364 of the second. But you can definitely find the band, the opening track 9 on the Auteur labels. And I should mention that there's more Project 197 if you get the Tape Excavation album.
That's
There's
true.
There's a track that's not on the single at all, or the EP at all.
Yeah. It was when I was looking for songs for Tape Excavation, I was going through some old cassette tapes, and I was surprised to find an improvisation that we did during that session, which never got used, and I had completely forgotten that it existed. And so I took the first 2.5 minutes off of that. It kind of devolved into something that wasn't worth sharing, so we just sort of faded it out.
Well, I'm glad you released it, because that was a special treat for me to have that included. And that is fairly widely available at this point, the Tape Excavation LP.
Well, it's available online in a few places. There are not that many copies of that were made, although we're looking at getting a reissue of that out in the next year. So
fantastic.
Get it more widely available.
It's an amazing record. Amazing.
Oh, thanks.
All right, Greg, any last thoughts before?
Well, just thanks, Bruce, for coming on. It's really interesting
pleasure.
kind of hearing the sort of the birth of things, I guess.
Yeah.
And what led up to the future things. So thanks again.
It is an ongoing story, that's for sure.
Yeah, quite fascinating.
Absolutely.
Good. Glad
Thank
you
you,
think
Bruce.
so.
We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Have a good night.
Yeah, you too. We'll see ya.